You're listening to Dead Air Podcast, part of splatterbutchers.net.
What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knife here with always
typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1988 classic Pumpkinhead.
I'm not really clear on what that was supposed to be.
It's my dirt bike I'm going to hit a little boy with.
Oh, and you were revving up as to hit him intentionally.
Well, when you say it like that, yes, I suppose I'm going to murder this bobble-headed blonde boy, and no one can stop me. I would probably feel worse about it than Joel did initially.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even if, I had a bench warrant out for my arrest or whatever the hell, or had been in jail before, you got to own up to stuff like this. You just have to.
There's this horror movie logic sometimes, Lydia, where an accident, a clear accident, has happened, and a bunch of characters stand around, and characters, rational ones, will say it was an accident, and then another character will just say at random, no one's gonna believe that. Why? That's like, why would no one believe that? He's like, I've been drinking. You have 6 witnesses that saw it be clearly an accident. It was an accident.
Exactly. And I've been drinking. That still, it doesn't erase the fact that it's an accident. It doesn't turn it into manslaughter. It really doesn't. And the fact that you have had a spotted past, you weren't a murderer. You're not wanted for murder. I think you'll be fine. The answer isn't rolling a body in a carpet or putting it in the swimming pool while you continue to have your frat party. It's not going to mess up your plans. Like, it is. A traffic ticket can mess up your plans, but you still have to own up to that. You really have to. But, I find it comical, highly comical. The whole beginning of this film, getting to the plot, the real meat of this plot is the titular character, Pumpkinhead. The idea is this almost like, Appalachian come by you magic that we're going to be encountering. That's what we want to get to. This whole dirt biking, killing kids. It sets it up for it, but it goes on quite long, don't you think?
Well, I don't know, because I suppose if you look at everything collectively, a lot of it is the setup to the creation of Pumpkinhead, and the inciting incident does take a little bit to get going, but I also think that it's necessary. The pacing doesn't bother me, because I think without it, it really would cheapen the revenge story. Now listen, I'm not here to really defend an extended dirt bike scene.
Thank you for that.
That does go on a little long. It would be enough to know that Ed leaves, they drive recklessly, they hit Billy. You don't really need all the excessive stuff, but I think it's a pretty tight movie, and it's so fun to look at. And I don't necessarily find the kids annoying, and I love the chaos of the scene immediately afterwards when the kid is killed. I love the way that the camera is following the backs of people's heads. I love how the good times are really over. There's no attempt of everything even remotely trying to be okay. It is like the trip is fucking absolutely over. They are at each other's throats. Joel is like villainous, like in terms of the way that he's behaving. Fun fact, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I'm actually on fairly friendly terms, full disclosure, with Gary Gianni. We have it happened years ago when I contacted him because he had a factual error in his horror movie book that I bought. And I had kind of he had gotten the date wrong. He's got the date wrong on 2 films in that movie, The Cat People 1934 and egregiously of all, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which he said came out in 1972, and that's just not correct. And so I remember I messaged him because I was annoyed because it was a time in my life when I didn't really have a lot of money, and I bought this book that I definitely couldn't afford. And I think it was I had the book home with me for 5 minutes, and it was the first, oh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1972. That's not right. And so my
I remember this. I do, clearly.
So he and I became friends. We wish each other happy birthday and stuff. We've chatted briefly.
That's cool.
Yeah. Like I said, we wish each other happy birthday and stuff like that. And he's a nice man. But the reason why I bring this up is and why I find it so funny, because I watched this film with the commentary track on, because I've seen this film so many times, so I thought I may as well. And Gary is on that commentary track. He is very defensive of the Joel character. And I know this because I used to write, dear listeners, for horrormovies.ca. And they were very obsessed with me doing top 10 lists. In fact, they were almost insistent. I would get messages constantly from the guy who ran that site, like, can you do more top 10s? So I decided to do horror movie jerks, assholes in horror movie films. And I gave Joel the #1 spot because he's egregious with his fucking behavior. He bombs someone in the head with a log. Like, he's pretty outrageous. And I just happened to say, like, Gary, look at this. Like, I wrote this article for horrormovies.ca, and look, I gave one of your characters the top spot. And he wrote like multiple paragraphs about why Joel is not a jerk and how he like learned his lesson throughout the course of the film. And in that,
he had a believable arc for a high school bully.
In that commentary track, he's there defending that Joel guy again. I was like, man, like, I don't know if this is just like, if he's frustrated that people didn't get it, or if like you're focusing too much on the first 20 minutes of the movie, Wes. You're not focusing enough on the next little bit. I was like, all right, I guess my bad.
What's funny is, like, even having some sympathy for characters that start out dark, I do have a proclivity for that. I don't recall him having a redemption arc necessarily. I'll have to watch it for the 5th time and pay closer attention to the guy that is like the villain that I don't like, that is behaving poorly.
I think though, I was watching it specifically for that, and his commentary on the Blu-ray that I have is quite helpful, actually, because it highlights moments in which I agree. Okay, yes, he's wrestling with his negative emotions. He panicked. He's got a criminal history. He does care about his girlfriend. You could see that his temper and his impulsiveness is probably what got him into some situations like this in the first place, in which, you know, he had a previous crime, somebody got injured, yada, yada, yada. He'd been drinking. So there's all these reasons and more why he's acting this way. And framing it in the sense of like, how desperate are you to keep secrets from coming out, and how do you wrestle with that guilt of a crime that you've committed and you seem to keep committing, and what would you do to maintain any semblance of a normal life and try to put that behind you? I could kind of see it, but I just mentioned that because Gary's a very sweet man, and he's very protective of these characters, is what my point I wanted to make.
nothing erases our introduction to the character where he's basically a beer me bitch kind of jock, which rubs me the wrong way.
For sure.
Absolutely. Because he should have
Indefensible.
had that beer dumped over his head, and she should have dumped him on the spot. And this is before the rest of the movie gets going, because I come at this from having watched it as a young girl and being bored to tears by a lot of this because I was a little too young. I wasn't interested in dirt bikes. I wasn't even that interested in dirty faced little kids and their heart of stone dads. I wasn't interested in that. I wasn't even interested in anything leading up to the birth of Pumpkinhead. You know, take me to the pumpkin patch. That's where I wanted to be. And you know how long it takes us to get there. I thought this movie was a big snooze and very dark. It was too dark. I could hardly tell what was going on. Granted, on a used and abused rental VHS in the 80s on some little piddly television, probably watching it in the daylight too, which doesn't help with a dark, scary movie. So I had got off on the wrong foot entirely with a movie that I do absolutely love. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But yeah, so I had watched it too young, on less than ideal circumstances. Didn't understand why it was taking so long to get to the interesting things. And even now, I'm like, if I would have rewritten this as a modern writer, you start with that kid on the road or in the dirt or as close to that as possible, because we can backfill all of that relationship stuff as we go. We can. But that's neither here nor there, because looking at it at face value, at the movie that I do love, I do like this movie a lot. And having watched it in a premium presentation, which I wish I would have seen as a kid, at night, in a proper room with good sound and excellent lighting and a crisp presentation of this very cool movie.
Do you have a physical copy of this film?
Yeah, we do.
Nice.
Yeah, Chris does. Chris is a fan. Chris is a much bigger fan than me even. Like, and I wouldn't say I'm like the biggest fan. It's not my number one movie. Halloweeny, it's getting into my top 5 from my top 10.
Wow. You know what? When you were describing being bored to tears by this, my heart was sinking a little bit. I was like, oh, I don't want to do a...
That was when I was young. This was also the girl that hated Suspiria.
Hated Suspiria. You turned around on Ginger Snaps. We did that for the show. Like,
yes, I did.
And this is not just like Lydia has to get into things. I turned around on 28 Days Later. I turned around on House of a Thousand Corpses. I liked it a lot. I seem to like things more when we do it for the show. But fuck all that, Lydia. What is this movie even about anyways? I want to know.
This movie is about the number one jerk on your top 10 jerks list. No, I'm kidding. This is a film about how one small mistake may have an unbelievable butterfly effect that you could not conceive, especially when you're dealing with that down-home voodoo.
You're absolutely right. As the Misfits sang, this is a story of a good man named Ed. Left his son for a moment, returned to him dead. The thing that I love so much about this film, and I think that this is going back to what I was saying about Lance Henriksen when we last covered a Lance Henriksen film, and he's so game with the material, but unfortunately it's failing him on every conceivable level, everything around him, and to the point in which he just kind of becomes flatline, because I think he's a very internal actor, and I think he could tell in that situation that it wasn't really working all out that well. But in this film, he went the extra mile. He built a relationship with that child actor, getting ready to do the film with him. He ad-libbed the story of his grandmother washing his hands. It's a real story from him. He wanted false teeth to just sort of like, I want to look like someone, and not a caricature, but I want to look like someone who is rural and has no access to dentistry, and so I want to be this person. And there's so much done. He apparently, not only did he ad lib lines, but he took out dialogue in certain scenes because he was like, no, we're gonna play this with just expression. We're gonna explain, and you can see that, like, the internal conflict on his face. And even though in a film like House 3, which you're just like, holy crap, like Lance Henriksen doesn't have a pulse in this, like he's barely alive in this, that he's just a quiet dude that loves his son and remembers from his childhood that there is a way to get revenge.
Not dissimilar to a Pet Cemetery story, and not dissimilar to a Dark Harvest story. And I'll put it right out there. I'm not going to wait till the end to say, don't you think this is a lot like Dark Harvest? Because it really is. And if you love those stories and you've slept on Pumpkinhead, or if you're a Pumpkinhead fan, and that's why you're here, welcome, then you might be interested in Pet Cemetery if you've never watched that or read it, or Dark Harvest, which is a new one that we've covered. We've covered all those films, have we not? We've done Pet Cemetery, right?
We have not done Pet Cemetery.
Well, there's an egregious omission. I think we should have to get to Pet Cemetery soon. We'll do a King of Palooza.
Oh my God, wait. I think we have done Pet Cemetery, because I remember us discussing the ending of the book one time on the show. I think
Did we do the new Pet Cemetery or the old one? I wonder. I'll have to look back in that.
Yeah, I think we did the old one, because I think I use it as an opportunity to do my Fred Gwynn impression, which I always try to bust out. So I think, but you know what? We'll double check that. But yes, this story has a fascinating origin story, which I absolutely love. It was based off of a poem by Ed Justin, and they had taken this concept, because the number one thing that you notice about Pumpkinhead, he doesn't look like he's got a pumpkin head. If anything, the character from Dark Harvest looks like he would be Pumpkinhead. Because he's got a pumpkin head, Lids.
Yeah, and this is more of a xenomorph looking thing.
It's to be expected, Stan Winston and his team coming right off of Aliens and like Terminator and all that kind of stuff. So this thing kind of looks like an alien from Aliens, Predator type thing. I think the number one thing that I wrestled with as a kid was not loving Pumpkinhead's design initially. I still think it doesn't look great in wide shot, but I think that what makes up for this movie for me, and I kept thinking about it the whole time while I was watching the movie, is holy fuck, is this movie beautiful. Like and I was wondering to myself, why isn't he Pumpkinhead? Why doesn't he have a jack-o'-lantern head? And it kind of comes down to the fact that the poem was just called Pumpkinhead, and so when Stan Winston and his team decided to go for designs, they specifically didn't want a pumpkin head, but I guess he does kind of have like a bulbous thing, but it's that birth from the pumpkin patch. It's his origin point, which the name apparently was derived from. They did try to change the name of the movie last minute, but thankfully they got their way. I think it was called Vengeance the Demon or something like that, like before it was released, which I can understand, but I think the Pumpkinhead thing is more mysterious. But if I had a problem with this film at all when I was little, it was that he didn't have a jack-o'-lantern head.
Well, they could have called it Blood Wings. I mean, he doesn't have wings, but they could have called it that. But I can see the bulbous head actually works. And like, even as a kid when I was watching it, and if you find that there's anything in the wide shots that is lacking, watch it on a VHS on a little tiny 10-inch screen in black and white, and that'll fix it. But I think that the bulbous nature, even as a kid, I was like, oh, I get it. He's not going to have a pumpkin head. It's not like a horror version of Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin. It's a guy born from the pumpkin patch with a pumpkin in his head, maybe like in pumpkin. He's of the pumpkin. He's a pumpkin head, like a redhead is doesn't literally have a red head, right? So he's a pumpkin head. Okay, it worked for me. The design worked for me even as a kid, and even more so now. There is a secret celebrity, two secret celebrities in this film. Blossom,
Yes.
Mayim Balak, is stars as one of the little kids in the back of the truck. And there's nothing quite like being a little kid in the back of a truck, I will say. And Dick Warlock is in this film. You may know him as The Shape, as Michael Myers, which one of my favorite Michael Myers too. And one of my favorite names in horror, Dick Warlock. How much would you pay for a name like Dick Warlock?
I would pay a lot of money. I'd probably force everyone to call me Warlock. He's the gentleman at the very beginning of the film, if I'm not mistaken, that gets tossed around. They have a nice framing device, not a framing design, but a nice opening to the film in which it demonstrates. And by the way, I don't know how many times I missed this or why I missed this, but it took until this viewing to understand that that was Ed as a little boy. And that's...
Oh my God, Wes.
I thought it was just to establish that this land knows of this legend. I didn't realize that it was literally his fucking family that was locking themselves indoors because somebody was there, even though it's so fucking obvious. I must have been like brain dead every single time they released that little bit of information, but
or focused on the creature, trying to see what you could see.
Right? I just think that this opening sequence, there's something that I wanted to point out about the visuals of this film, like the lighting, the way that everything is framed. This was Stan Winston's directorial debut, and he was like, you can really tell that this is a visual guy, because to get this so right initially, and one of the things that I kept thinking about while watching this film for the show was, man, I really feel like this is an autumnal movie. But then when you're watching it, I was like, this is taking place in like the dead of summer. It looks hot as balls out and all the trees are green. Why do I just associate this film with autumn? And it's the oranges. There is such powerful orange lighting, particularly when he goes to see the witch. Holy fuck. Mm-hmm. Like it's beautiful. Like, talk about just extreme beauty. All of these influences that they were talking about earlier about being inspired by Mario Bava films like Black Sunday and Black Sabbath and all that kind of stuff, and just getting really and a little bit of Deliverance in there, like getting all of these aesthetics together and just bathing it in these powerful oranges, powerful blues. When you're out by the fruit stand, it's this like flat beige. It's crazy how beautiful this movie is. And while I was watching it, I really was getting a whole new appreciation to just how beautiful a movie of this is. And they referred to it as like a dark fairy tale, and that's such a great way to think about it.
I think the only other film that has the same sort of color scheme that really drives it home would be The Reflecting Skin, where it's just the countryside oranges, yellows, browns melding together into an ochre that is very evocative of fall. And I believe that Reflecting Skin also takes place in the summer too. And it's maybe just a different hot summer in the Dust Bowl where those are the predominant colors, not so much the lush greenery that we have, like the super lush greenery and green grass, because we aren't in a desert or desert adjacent area, or having nothing but fields of hay or wheat or other sort of grains that retain that color longer and maybe aren't as like green as having like the flax fields that we have here, or our sunflower fields and stuff, which are way more colorful than that. Even cornfields are pretty green up until a certain point. Then it's really literally autumn when they start to look like that. They don't look like that through the summer whatsoever. So yeah, it is gorgeous. The lighting is impeccable at every scene, even the dirt biking hot summer days. From the beginning, where we have a lot of shadow going on, a lot of dark at night, candlelight, sparsely lit through windows too for quite a bit of it. The lighting is just handled so perfectly. And then even, stark daylight out in the countryside. You can feel the heat though through the use of lighting. So I really, really appreciate that. And we've already had an exercise in what this is like in the dark. We go to spend the bulk of the film going forward at night and in the dark. So it is only a little bit that is this like brightly lit, but it is a lot of like brown sand, oranges. It's very true. Aside from blue sky, which contrasts perfectly with it because that's the complementary color.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is.
This film opens up with that scene where we get a glimpse. They're weirdly not shy about showing this creature. It's almost the opposite of the monster problem. The monster problem, dear listeners, you I think you could probably figure it out, but it's when you hide the monster until your third act and you've built it up in your mind, and by the time you see it, that shark looks pretty shitty at the end of Jaws, I'll just say. But, this is an example where they're, and maybe it's the fact that they're so used to working on these massive budgeted sci-fi films where they're just like, no, we're gonna show off. People are coming here to see the monster. We're here to show the monster. They're more inspired by James Cameron and Steven Spielberg and these types of people that are just like, I want to show us the monster. So you get a pretty good idea of Pumpkinhead's silhouette very early on in the film. I think that another movie, they would show the aftermath of the body to let you know that there's a creature, but to just show it like that, to show Ed seeing it. They transition to now Ed, a man, Lance Hendrickson, he's got this young boy and they have this very sweet relationship. He's not overly, I remember him being like way more lovey-dovey with his son than I think he is. It does have this kind of distracted man of the earth type guy who's probably not totally great at saying everything that he's feeling, but he tells his boy some sweet stories, and the kid's very cute, and he does, like I said, ad-lib that story about his grandmother's skin being so thin on her hands and it made her hands like tissue paper, and it felt good when she washed his hands, like, and then we get to the fruit stand, and it's this weird, I don't know if the implication is like they grow their own produce, but at the end of the day, they have access to this produce, and he uses that to sell from people. And then a group of teens or young people come barreling down in their obnoxious sports cars and they're slamming beers. They're the teens in a slasher film that have sort of entered this rural space. Now, we've seen this many times before. Evil, technologically advanced city kids entering a space in which they don't understand and they're not welcome. The evil other, either back in the 30s, it would be just white people going to like foreign lands in Europe.
Yeah.
But this, you're dealing with poverty and superstition, and again, like dirty, muddy pigpen children, like 12 of them coming out the back of a truck that looks like it's from the fucking turn of the century.
The thing I like the most about this is that it's not egregious. It's not outrageous. It's totally believable. And you aren't dealing with backwoods hillbilly freaks. You're dealing with prosperous, happy, loving people that just happen to have a witch that lives in the forest near them. But other than her, I mean, they are just, yes, they love the land. The land provides. They work the land. They're people of the land. but they have like familial dynamics that are completely recognizable to anybody else. And like I said, there's nothing more fun than being a kid of 12 in the back of a dirty pickup truck. It's fun, that sort of like haying season where everyone gets together. I mean, it's reflected properly in this, a rural lifestyle. Yeah, the kids might look filthy and dressed in rags, but that's their play clothes, whatever, it's fine. Like that, it's reflected properly, I think. So it's not a caricature of a rural or hillfolk lifestyle, and in any way, shape, or form. It's not disparaging, I don't think, even with the reflection up against the city kids who aren't, they're not tearing through there in their cigar boats. They have dirt bikes, noisy, terrible, stinky dirt bikes. Some of them are pretty terrible people, but they're not total cartoon characters. They're completely believable, and why they're out there is believable, much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Although the Hillfolk or the Sawyer family is a little bit cartoonish, of course, in that film, but here it's not. And the differences between the two groups of people aren't so great. So they can, like, it's not like they're speaking completely different languages to one another. They are very similar and have common ground, especially when it comes to the safety of children. That's one thing that everyone can agree on, no matter what clan you're part of. So I really do appreciate that it's completely believable. It's not like people living in the Dogpatch Hills look at these people and go, whoa, they're really backwoods. So I really do appreciate that it's approachable hillbilly idol. It's approachable rural lifestyle and completely believable. And the city kids aren't 100% caricatures.
They enter this space to pick up supplies for their trip. They're going up to a cabin and they're going to go dirt biking for the weekend.
Will this stop them from getting out their dirt bikes right now in the fucking driveway of the convenience store? No.
No, because I don't know if you've ever gone dirt biking, Lydia. I haven't, but if I'm basing this hobby completely off of Pumpkinhead, you get so rock fucking hard for dirt biking, you got to do it right here, right now. Talking to a boy and his dog while we get groceries. What are you, fucking stupid? We got to get on our dirt bikes.
I will interject that I know two dirt biking enthusiasts. I've met dirt biking enthusiasts all my life, but I know of two beautiful women who are dirt bike professionals, and they would never dream of doing this fucking bullshit in the driveway of one of their neighbors' stores ever. Like, this is disgusting to me. They would watch this and be disgusted by this behavior. So just putting that out there.
It's like how the shark in Jaws ruined sharks for society. This might have, if this movie did a little bit better, it might have put a tarnish on dirt bike enthusiasts and say all dirt bikers just run over little blonde boys.
Hills Have Eyes 2 didn't help either.
Right? Oh, yeah. I feel so bad. They're like, they make fun of Billy's glasses. If you ever want to know if a character is a piece of shit, the sweet little boy that's like, I love you, Daddy. Let's get ready to open our fruit stand. It's like, look at the Coke bottle fucking glasses on this dork. Like, what the
Mean, right? Like, super mean. And even people within their own peer group are like, whoa, that was mean.
Let me ask you this. This definitely is Joel is just here because he's Steve's brother, right? And nobody fucking likes this guy except for his brother. In fact, multiple characters are calling him out. The thing that I do like is Joel has this dipshit fucking attitude, but people don't really suffer him. They call him out pretty much immediately for all of his behavior. It does. The only one that, he brings his poor beer fetching girlfriend like with him and Kim, and you feel bad because it's just like, oh, what a dirtbag. Sorry, like he's a jerk. That's why he got the number one spot. The so he's a no good Nick hellbent for leather, and he in his when Billy runs over over a hill, he's obscured. He's going after his dog Gypsy, and is struck. And immediately Joel wants to turn tail and get the fuck out of there because the same old, right? We're all going to go to jail, or I'm going to go to jail, very specifically. And they try to get him to stay, and he is like violently getting out of there. And he is going back up to the cabin. Now, interestingly, the way that this film is written, they focus on different characters at different times, and they give characters tasks that would make you think that certain characters are going to survive a lot longer than they do. One case in particular is, of course, Joel's brother Steve, who refuses to leave. Everyone is in hysterics, and they can't just leave him here. Lance Hendrick's character, Ed, has left the fruit shop because of the fact that one of his friends, one of the locals, Wallace, he needs to get feed. Ed forgot it at his house. He's going to come and get it. He's going to deliver it later. But to do that, he's got to leave. So it's just this little boy who's not quite dead yet. And they wait for him. And this scene in which Ed returns to his boy and runs to him, his hat falls off. Steve is sort of like, what do you say? You have nothing to say. You just can sort of impotently explain it was an accident. And then the scene in which he's holding out the glasses. Oh, I'm not a person that really gets emotional at kids stuff, but he was just such a sweet little boy. And I got glasses, and I can relate to people and that moment of we got his glasses, it's the only thing you can think to do to help. I think this scene is really, really well done. And going back to the way that it's directed and shot, this scene is fucking wild because you have scenes in which they're on sticks. You have scenes in which it's obviously people with shoulder cams, and then you end the scene with a crane shot. All of these different camera techniques, this must have taken forever to film.
More than likely. And considering that it's not a very dialogue heavy scene, and even the pandemonium of him getting hit by the motorcycle isn't super dialogue heavy, except for a few expletives and hysterics and blame being tossed around and arguments. You're focusing more on this little boy's breathing becoming more labored, which is a very cool shot. There's a lot of cameras on the ground for this. It's fantastic that way. So we go from every angle surrounding this boy's death, and we end with no dialogue and just the most withering look from Ed, Lance Hendrickson. I keep saying Hendrickson. It's a lifelong problem. I know his name is not Hendrickson, but I'll always say it. So I'm just putting it out there. Everyone listening, I do know his name. I just can't not say it wrong. I don't know why. But anyway, it is just absolutely beautiful, and withering is the best word I can think of. Because I'm not overly worried about the only scene that will always get to me because it impacted me so much when I read the book is the death of Gage in Pet Sematary. Spoiler alert for those who have not read or watched Pet Sematary, but I think that impacted me so much as a kid. And even as a kid, I don't know why this didn't have that same sort of weight, and it should have, because he is a super sweet little boy. I mean, I think maybe that the blame sits on the father for leaving him, where when you're living rurally and you have this stand, and the little boy's probably manned the stand alone numerous times, even though he's maybe 7 years old. Like, it's probably an everyday thing. It's probably happened all the time, but you don't count on these upstarts doing their dirt bike tricks in your backyard or whatever. So you still want to blame the father for leaving his child unattended.
I think you might be onto something with that. When it's hard for us to understand leaving a child alone in that situation, because listen, I think we were both latchkey kids to a certain extent. We're of that generation. And so, but I always had my siblings to take care of me. And also I wasn't really running around out in a field as a kid. I was just playing Nintendo in my basement. So I was always kind of safe. But, you know, I think that in this situation, anything could happen. Like fuck getting hit by a dirt bike. Some, like, what is he going to run the cash? Or
fucking coyote could come in and tear the place up. You never know.
You know, he's not as small as Gage. Gage is like a toddler.
He was like 3.
Yeah, he's like a baby. And also that scene in Pet Sematary, not to compare, although it's hard not to, because you basically have like little blonde boys, the inciting incident being your little blonde boy gets killed.
Yeah.
And in comparing them, there's something so awfully brutal about the scene in Pet Sematary. You know, Denise Crosby, like, get the baby, like her screeching, him saying no, they milk it for all it's worth with the photos and people, and like the kid really not knowing it. Like Gage didn't know what the fuck was going on, right? Like that kid and like that truck, holy shit. And you can imagine what that does to someone so small. And whereas like this kid is kind of like, you're going after your dog. Like Joel's brother misses him and Billy still didn't move. Right. So it like, maybe it's meant to be happening. Listen, I'm not saying like this kid deserved it because he wasn't careful. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, while comparing the two scenes, I think it's so much more brutal on the side of Pet Sematary than this film. But like, I think where this film excels is where as Pet Sematary really goes for the melodramatic, like really. Yeah,
Lewis Creed is actually trying to do something to stop this, where here Ed doesn't even have that luxury.
Exactly. And so he carries his boy, and he brings him back home. And again, it's like take him to a doctor. What fucking doctor? They don't have a doctor there. You get a washcloth on the forehead. What else? Like, what else do you do? And he says, "Daddy." He passes away. Oh, it's so sad. And then Ed remembers, and he is going to wrap his boy up in that blanket, and he is going to head to his very rural friends who have 700 children.
Yeah, 4 generations in the same house, 700 children. Sounds about right. A lot of chickens. Probably it's 2 chickens per kid.
I love Bunt so much. I think he's such a great character. I also love that the gravity in which everyone is speaking, like all of these rural folk, none of them are really yelling. None of them ever really bring their voices up. They talk, even when he's like telling Bunt to get back to the house, is like, I said, get back to the house. Like, it's not like, boy, I said, get down to that house. You know what I mean? Like they're playing it really sitting on their chest.
Yeah, you reserve your yelling for horses because they just won't listen. They're stubborn.
And you know that when Granddad says something, that's the end of it. Right?
Yes.
So
Absolutely. And you have that sort of like implication of violence because they are hard men. Mm-hmm. Period. That's, you know, I lived with the implication of violence, which I would have never experienced from all my old like overall wearing dusty, dirty old uncles because they looked like big, mean, tough dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have to raise their voices. Except Uncle George. He was a real yeller. He's just a big booming dude. You know, you could probably relate being a big dude with a big voice. He was a big booming dude. He came across as yelling, even though he wasn't.
The want for revenge could easily be played in this film as something that everyone gets behind. But instead, Ed is the person that is trying to convey, again, without yelling. He is not raising his voice or anything, but he is saying, city folk came here, killed my boy, and left him. Now, not entirely accurate, but the majority of them did leave him. And I'm not going to tell a grieving father, technically Edward. Obviously, I'm not going to play that card. And, you know, his friend tells him, Mr. Wallace tells him, you go home and you bury your boy. Because, and you get this sense, we've heard the rhyme of Pumpkinhead. We've seen this thing, and people just know maybe what they're not really afraid of is the entity itself, but everyone here seems to understand the cost and what it will take to make this happen, except for Ed, strangely. But
yeah, who was actually one of the few people that literally witnessed what this creature can do.
While he is asking specifically for the location of this old woman, and Mr. Wallace says, I can't tell you what I don't know. And Bunt, watching this, sees an opportunity for 20 bones in his hot little hand.
That's a lot of money for a little Huckleberry Finn fella, isn't it?
Yeah, he probably wouldn't even make that painting fences or getting other people to paint fences. But, you know, I can really, how much could those sweet potatoes cost at that fruit stand, right? Probably it's probably pennies on the dollar.
It's probably $3 for $1.
Or are they $3 for $1?
That's what I would pay back then.
Oh, hell yeah.
A sweet potato.
$3 for $1
Yeah.
for sweet potatoes? That's a fair deal. Sold. And I don't know why they're spraying them with water. It's like, you don't need to spray sweet potatoes with water. But anyway, that's my produce clerk coming out.
But, Wes, to be fair, have you ever taken care of a produce stand on the edge of a dusty road?
They're
definitely spraying the dust off of them.
Yeah, they
flies.
definitely
Yeah.
they definitely look like the dustiest produce you ever
Very
did see.
dusty.
Now, we know, or Bunt knows, the location of this place. I find it odd that Ed doesn't know himself, but narratively speaking, I understand. But he's lived there his entire life. Why do these people know? He lives like a 20-minute drive away from them. Why do they know something that he also wouldn't know as a man born and raised in the exact same place, who's also seen this creature? You know, that's not really important because Bunt agrees to take him halfway to this old woman's house.
You know,
And
something's creepy when the locals will only take you halfway.
it's very Dracula,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
We'll go no further than this. And the old woman named Haggis, and man, do I love every scene she's in. This, if I were to describe anything about this film that I think is just immaculate, it's every time Florence Schofer is on the screen. She is so good. The old woman makeup, she looks...
That's the award-winning effect there, Stan Winston. I hope he did all of this because it is immaculate. That's the best word.
It is the quintessential go to this old cottage. It's like you're encountering the Baba Yaga, an old crone by the perfect definition. If you like Tim Burton's like Sleepy Hollow, if you like The Witch, like all of these things, this look of this character and these scenes, the way that they're lit, blows them all out of the water, in my
Gretel
opinion.
and Hansel, Snow White with Sigourney Weaver, all those things that feature a very haggard hag, a crony crone. This is the ultimate of all crones, and it's not just her look, and you don't just get a flash of it. It is, you spend time with this person in their element and their environment. So it is the lighting. You can smell it. You can feel the temperature. Every line is perfect. Every note of her voice is crafted to perfection to express the deepest, craggiest crone you've ever encountered.
And it would be so easy to go for some kind of jump scare or try to do something to evoke her menace, but they do it with stillness. She is so still. And the camera from the back, she's being bathed in that orange light by the fire. That the hair, there, like the wig is so incredible. It's so wispy and you see the light through it. She looks like a fucking mummy. And yet here she is speaking to you, and she is true neutral. She is not, she'll do what you ask for a price, and he fills fills her this cup with gold. I don't know where he gets like solid gold pieces, like, but perhaps they were family heirlooms. Perhaps, you know, there's a million different ways where you could get it, but it almost looks like he gives her fucking pirate treasure. And
It's like it's some found objects. Like, who knows? Maybe he goes panning in the river downstream from a fairground.
some of them look like straight up like doubloons.
Yes. Yes.
and, and so sorry.
It does look like pirate treasure. I never thought of it as pirate treasure before. I just thought, this is that guy's stuff he's collected from his mom and his wife, his dead wife.
It's like
her things.
my grandmother's gold doubloons that we have in the rural South. But
it is a tiny sack of pirate treasure that he probably wears inside of his waistband.
She is willing to do it for a price. And she's willing to do it. But again, she reiterates the cost. The powerful price of what he wants to do. We won't fully understand the extent of it until the end, but he needs to go to a graveyard, Razorback.
Which is absolutely lovely. This, you think that this was the most atmospheric scene in this witch's hovel. Nah, the pumpkin patch is the number one most beautiful place in the planet. I want to go there.
I think that they knew, if you're going to call this movie Pumpkinhead and you are, because you don't like it, it's when it comes to creature designs, you have basically, it's the job of Stan Winston, who brought his team over, who worked on all of these other humongous movies with him, who have all of this experience. Your job is to take your visual idea to a master of his craft. And I could not imagine how nerve-wracking that would be, but he made it clear that he didn't want it to be a jack-o'-lantern headed creature. They wanted to do something else. So, but you need to then really, if you're going to call a movie Pumpkinhead, I want to see some fucking pumpkins.
Yeah. Yeah. Some gorgeous pumpkins. It's weird how this burial ground in among the pumpkin patch is sort of on a bloom of earth. that stands somehow 10 feet above everything around it.
It's like you've crossed over into like Feylands or something like that. And again, like it evokes like Guillermo del Toro. It evokes like they described it in the commentary track that I listened to as a dark fairy tale. And I never really thought of it that way before because I'm not articulate. So I don't think about things in flowery terms, but it really hit it home for me, especially that scene, because you're right. That bloom of earth is impossible. It looks like a structure, but yet it's earth. And we have Ed dig up, what do you call it? Like some kind of
A husk.
a husk. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like this sort of fetal positioned, mummified creature. It's hard to say what it really is. And he returns this husk, and when he brings it back to the hovel, I love that word. When he brings it back to the witch's hovel, all that soil is just falling off of it. And then this witch begins her work, and then we see this connection with blood, and he gets one final warning of this is it. Like, so what do you want to do? And he wants to go through with it. And so he does. And Pumpkinhead in the flesh rises.
And keeps rising because this thing is like 7.5 feet tall. It's a wonderful, gargantuan, powerful, yet spindly creature. I always found it kind of gangly and looks very much like Alien. And this is really the antithesis to that monster problem. And not that it's a problem in Alien, because I feel that, like few movies, you get that real payoff of a scary, realistic looking creature. And we all know what sort of powerhouses of creativity went into bringing the xenomorph to life. We get something similar here, except that we have an idea of what it has looked like. And at this point, I think we're about a half hour into the film.
Yes.
Which to a 9-year-old girl is fucking forever and goddamn torture. But that's not too bad. We have an idea of what this creature had looked like. We know what its power is, how powerful it is. And to see it in all its glory in the mystical kind of hovel, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. So where do we go now? We cut back to the cabin with the jerk Joel, who, according to other people, is beginning his redemption arc at this point and becoming forgivable, perhaps.
I don't know.
But I don't think so.
He hits that one guy so hard in the head with a log that he knocks him out cold. You have
all to protect his adamant stance that he is going to get arrested. He can't let anyone know about this. It was an accident. We're all going to just stay quiet, and we're not going to tell anybody.
You want to know something interesting about that cabin, Lids? It's the cabin from Friday the 13th, Part 4.
I thought it looked familiar. Really? That's fantastic. And that's my favorite cabin out of all the Friday the 13th cabins, because we spend more time in it than any.
Really?
Wow.
Isn't it interesting? Once I learned that bit of information, it's all I could see. I was like, oh my God. Like, yes, like everything is like, you know, it's a functioning cabin. So things, permanent fixtures, and the way that everything's laid out, it's so fucking obvious that it's the cabin from that movie that I've seen so many times. You have a bunch of different characters, you know, his girlfriend, Kim, Maggie, the very religious one who's, you know, got her blanket on and she's just having a meltdown because they, you know, killed a little boy. They are really trying to get the keys back from him. Chaos ensues. Joel locks two of them up in a fucking closet, and they're just awaiting for old Steve to get back. His nickname is Scratch, which I find they use for a little bit, and then they just stop calling him Scratch, and then it's just back to Steve.
Well, there's a point where the situation commands a certain amount of respect, and nicknames are not to be used. really. I think that's what they're trying to get at with that. It's not that his nickname became forgotten or anything. It was just that everything became a lot more serious. And, the same way when people would be calling you by your full name when things are serious, right? I think that was what was going on there. It is a dumb nickname, and nicknames are dumb, but that's just my opinion. Luckily, we're not long for shenanigans of getting to know these people or their intricities or worrying about someone's redemption arc, whether it's there or not. We get Pumpkinhead. He's quick. He moves quick through these woods because I'm imagining this cabin is full on the other side of the mountain from Haggis's shed. It's not just down the hill, but that or Pumpkinhead moves with alacrity and speed.
This is the first bit of subversion in the plot, I think. When you have this, you got a few characters here that you could, in theory, view as someone who's going to survive until the bitter end of this picture. But it's not like that, because in the midst of conversation, when Steve returns, deals with his brother, even offers to take the blame. I will say that I hit him with my bike. Then you're off the fucking hook. Joel doesn't like that suggestion either. Maggie leaves. Steve is in conversation with the woods. And then Steve, ironically, is the first one to get killed. And one of the things that I forget consistently about this film is that Pumpkinhead's got a little bit of sass with it. He likes to play around. Maybe he's not a jokester like Freddy Krueger, but he's got a wicked sense of, like a very evil mime. He will make people suffer and play with them and mock people with their bodies. And he easily has the power, the speed, the desire. He is only here to do this thing, to instantly kill these people. But even though Ed is aware that Pumpkinhead is there to kill them because that's what he summoned him for, Ed didn't realize that old Pumpkinhead was going to be silly with it.
Not only did he not realize that old Pumpkinhead was going to be silly with it, he also did not realize, and I don't think anybody did except maybe old Haggis, that there is another angle to this revenge, another cost, as it were. Is that no matter how bad you want revenge on these people, I don't think you want to see through the killer's eyes as it is exacted, because that's something that Ed discovers, that he is a unwilling tag along for all of this murder and mayhem. And not just murder and mayhem, not just clean retribution. It is mean-spirited and evil and cruel.
Pumpkinhead seems to be enraged by the concept that religion could repel him. Maggie, with her crucifix, gets a cross carved into her face by his claws. I love it. I fucking love it.
Yeah.
There's something that you were saying just now that really made me think of one of the type of person who would call upon Pumpkinhead for revenge. Real hands-off type. Because if you were the type of person that would, Ed's got a gun. What is stopping him from marching over? He knows where they're at. Clearly he knows where they're at. What is stopping him from marching over there with a gun and just blowing their brains out because you killed my boy and I want revenge? But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to, I'll just sit at home in my cabin and drink and it'll all get taken care of for me. Like a killer that uses poison or sends an explosive in the mail. They don't actually want to be present for any of it. So I think the type of person that would want to use a revenge demon as proxy, it is a delicious bit of irony that they will force you to be there for it.
I think that's the only way to be. Otherwise, everyone would be using this revenge demon, right? This might put a hitch in your giddy up if you are forced to watch, which is terrible. Like, the whole thing is terrible. And Ed isn't a mean and cruel person, but he hadn't bargained for this whatsoever.
Joel didn't bargain for watching poor Kim get dragged away. Pumpkinhead's got this real affinity for like the off-screen hand grab and then you get pulled up. Seems to be how a lot of people, and then eventually he just drops their haggard bodies in front of you. I do like how he shoved Maggie, like kind of like rubbed her face in the glass and then just shoved it through. Again, I don't know, maybe it was her evoking God so much that pissed him off. It's hard to say, but she seemed to get the most. He pitches Kim's ass off a fucking tree and she falls on this perfectly placed rock. So she bends the wrong way down it. What do you think about old Pumpkinhead in action?
I think he's very animalistic, and it's hard for me to reconcile. Was he originally a child? It's very childish sort of behavior as far as this almost bullying, taunting. Yeah. But at the same time, behaving like a jaguar or a bear that can always have one up on you because of its speed, its size, its agility, its strength, all of those things. And it knows that it's stronger, faster, and bigger than you and can tear you apart, but will take the moments to set things up or to get in the right position. It's not just coming in there raging. And that's part of what makes me think that it's like a sneaky 11-year-old boy at heart or something like that. Is a sneaky prankster. I'm always trying to figure out what Pumpkinhead was, who Pumpkinhead was, because it is humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
It was a human at one point, I'm sure. There's no real record of where this came from. It's not like the Cloyne, where we have a library scene exactly explicitly telling us the origin or who it was first.
I can tell you that these kids, when the chips are down, they really band together, because there's a point in which Chris hugs Joel and they're helping him. I don't know if I'd be so eager to help a dude. Now, to be fair, Joel did say that he should probably, I will turn myself into the police. It's gotten too far. That's before everything got really terrible and people started to die. And then he found out after asking why you left Steve that his brother is dead. And so I think there's I don't know if it's a redemption arc so much as he just feels remorse and wants to survive. Now, they will go, again, what seems like a hop, skip, and a jump away to these rural families, and their houses are all locked up. And we're seeing now, years later, what Ed saw as a boy.
People banging on the door saying, "Help me," and people inside the house knowing exactly what's going on saying, "Don't you dare open that door. Just be quiet. Go to bed."
Even even Ed now, who realizes the gravity of what he's doing and he can't go through with it anymore. People have already died, and perhaps it's been enough. And when he returns on his hands and knees to Haggis, she says there's not a damn thing she can do. It's just got to let it run its course. And she warns him that all you can do is, if you try and stop it, is you will just hurry up what's already going to happen to you. Like, you are on this irreversible course. So this is what you wanted, and now you decide that you don't want it anymore. Well, the time for that was before we started it.
It seems that one of the only people that also understand what's going on is little Bunt. And I don't know where Bunt would have heard all of this, because his father and grandfather claim to not know much about this. Not where the witch lives. They don't really, they just know that it's none of their business, that if you just stay inside and stay out of the way, you won't get killed. Like, I don't know how many times this has happened. Like, we're under the impression in a way that when Ed was little, Pumpkinhead was unleashed. And that was it. That was the last time anyone had seen Pumpkinhead. But it seems like maybe every couple months or so, these people deal with this bullshit, because they seem to know a lot about it, to the point that Bunt knows. Bunt's only maybe 13, 15, somewhere in there.
Tops, yeah.
So he must have encountered this, or maybe heard many people talking about it outside of his family, because they don't seem to share this sort of information with a young scamp who is going to relay the local legend to the remaining campers.
You know, he delivers a line about when he's making his deal with Ed, where he says that old woman scares the hell out of him. And it led me to believe that he's spoken to her. He's been there before. So maybe it's almost like he has gone and they're on a dare, or perhaps been there, lost his way when he was really young and ended up there, or he's had some previous interactions with him. Or
maybe they bring her supplies and stuff like that, just being neighborly, or perhaps other neighbors have tried to enlist her to assist them with bringing Pumpkinhead around, and they've decided, oh, that's what it costs. I don't want to do that. So maybe he's been privy to people deciding to not use Pumpkinhead.
It's really hard to say, but at the end of the day, he is like a slingshot wielding scamp. So we don't know.
Yeah, he is.
So we don't know per se, but I seem to got the impression that there's some backstory there that would be interesting to explore. Like, I know there was a comic book series, but maybe they could maybe even do like a weird novella or something like that could expand on this a little bit more. I would read that.
Yeah.
Joel is dispatched. Finally, he is impaled by a gun. Now, this is all coming into terms of the fact that Ed has understood that he needs to stop this himself if he's going to stop it at all. And he clearly understands that he is connected to this creature on a very literal level, and is going to go and try to help the remaining kids. Joel ends up, he takes out Pumpkinhead. Joel gets a little too cocky with it and tries to double tap Pumpkinhead, but of course they can't die like this. And so it's so funny when you see like Pumpkinhead holding a gun and it looks so random, and you think, is he gonna just shoot the guy? No, he's gonna stab him with the gun, and like I said, get silly with it. And then we have Bunt taking these survivors. He disobeys his Mr. Wallace, his grandfather, and escapes them to this old church. And again, this is going to be another example of, okay, so Pumpkinhead is a demon. Maggie and Steve were convinced that, okay, well, you know, God is here and all that kind of shit. That definitely didn't work, but perhaps was it consecrated ground or whatever could repel him, like he's a Dracula. Now, I don't know if a church being that dilapidated means that the whammy got taken off of it, or if they are dealing with something that they do not understand.
Deconsecration is magic words, from what I understand. It's not like they dig up all the holy ground or make sure that the water table underneath is not blessed anymore. Like, it's literally magic words. So deconsecration over time makes a lot of sense. I'm not a deconsecration expert, but I'd venture to say that, yeah, maybe that sort of abandonment and dilapidation, or maybe there's all kinds of unholy shit has gone on in there, aside from like smoking wacky tobacco or something. Like something maybe literally unholy has gone on in there, perhaps. Who knows? It's a very cool looking church, I will say.
Oh yeah, all that blue lighting. And you're looking at the set, it's so stark, but yet with lighting and that camera angle, it looks great. Pumpkinhead comes through the door. He doesn't seem, well, phased really at all that he's going in there. And eventually he's going to get silly with it again with Chris, because Chris is going to get on a dirt bike, the evil dirt bikes lids, the instruments of Billy's destruction. But don't you worry, Pumpkinhead thought of that, and he's going to be like, I got the chain.
Which, you know, defies sort of what we've been up against, this animalistic sort of childish sort of thing. It doesn't borrow something from the mind of the person that it is attached to.
That's a completely reasonable explanation. My entire thought process was that it may look like an animal, but it is a demon. Mm-hmm. And so it clearly has sentience. It has intelligence. It knows what things are. It didn't use a gun the way that you're supposed to use a gun, but it held a rifle in the best way that it could in its claws. And it knows that it's fucking with you. Like it knows that it can kill you at any time. It knows that it's not just killing you, it's terrorizing you, and it knows what terrorizes you. And and he seems to know everything he needs to know, because one of the things that I find nebulous about the Pumpkinhead curse is the only one that killed his boy was Joel, and he didn't see that, and he didn't know, like Tracy and Chris, they weren't even on dirt bikes. Like neither was Kim. So is it just like, so Ed had to somehow mentally relay that I want you to kill those city kids. So all of them, every kid that he saw, because Joel dies. I don't think Ed even knew that he specifically was the one that killed Billy. There's no way he could have known. No one told them.
No, it's up for the demon to know. It's the same way the universal pool of consciousness that demons are all tapping into to know how a motorcycle works, or how a motorcycle works since the last time they were out, whether they encountered a motorcycle or not. That it's the same sort of universal pool that they know what happened. They know who's actually, you know, the villain here, but it's anyone that gets in his way.
They do specifically say that. Man, Tracy really fucking ditches Chris toot sweet. Like he is her and Bunt get the fuck out of there so fast, and he's not even hurt yet. They just straight up get in Ed's truck, and he is still like crawling, trying to get out of there, and then Pumpkinhead steps on his back.
What's a save yourself situation? I mean, you'd like to think that we'd be the heroes and be like, let's just wait another minute for our friend to regain his footing. Oops. You know, they didn't even stick around to see that.
No, they just assumed that he was going to get killed. Now, Pumpkinhead does like to play around a little bit, so maybe they thought they would have had time, but, well, it's really all going to come down to the fact that Ed needs to be the person that does this himself, because right now Bunt has put himself in direct harm. Now, if you still don't think that you can completely absolve the city kids, Bunt's not a city kid. He's one of your own.
I don't remember what happens to Bunt.
He gets attacked, but doesn't get killed. He gets like, like, you know, not to be overly simplistic, but Pumpkinhead does what Pumpkinhead does. He picks him up by the fucking leg and like and dangles them, because that's what Pumpkinhead does with people. He's like, it'd be like if I decided to like pick up every short person and just dangle them by their leg and be like, hey, you son of a bitch, I'm taller than you.
Like a cat with a mouse.
Exactly. A cat with a mouse. Very, again, like, I like your description of like, he's panther-like, because I do.
Yeah. Like something that would hang up in the tree and reach down and grab you. That's how I picture like a jaguar hunting, or a more jungle animal, which is like completely removed from where we are with this.
There is a connection happening that they have. We know that Ed and Pumpkinhead not only share a mind because of these psychic episodes, the seizures that Ed has been having throughout the film, but we also know that what happens to one is happening to the other. And one of the farmer's dogs bites Ed on the arm like a good boy, because he's scared, and there's you're on his land, and your owner didn't like that because he had his gun out. And then Pumpkinhead's arm, he winces in pain at the dog bite that Ed got. Then Ed will also like sort of hilariously impale himself on a pitchfork. I guess just to further, if the dog thing was too subtle, I'll also let you know that me getting stabbed in the shoulder also hurts. And meanwhile, Ed is going through this demonic transformation. And when Bunt is finally captured by Pumpkinhead, that's the last time we're going to see Pumpkinhead with his non-Lance Hendrickson face. So the next time we see him, he's going to kind of look a little bit like Ed, and Ed's starting to look a little like Pumpkinhead.
Are we really going to end up with a full transference? Do you think that's like really honestly where it goes, where they just switch, and then would Lance Henriksen start killing people?
I'm not entirely sure.
Or would Pumpkinhead in Ed's new body continue killing people, and there would be just a weeping Pumpkinhead in the corner somewhere going, oh God, what have I done?
I think the impression I got, so we know for a fact that if you want to stop Pumpkinhead, Ed, and you're going to do anything that it takes, just kill yourself.
Yeah.
Well, he tried that. And it seems as though that doesn't break it. You can't kill yourself, because not only is Pumpkinhead not killable, you seem to not be killable as well. So that is connected. I would assume that every time Pumpkinhead gets closer to completing his mission, you lose a little bit more of yourself. Now, perhaps if your revenge was on one specific person, the process would be over within, as long as it took Pumpkinhead to kill that one guy. But in this case, you have like half a dozen people that you need to kill. And so Ed seems to be losing himself as time goes on, becoming demonic, fighting it off. And I think that if all of the people, at least all of the city kids were killed, maybe even now Bunt, I think the Pumpkinhead, it would be what happened. Because Haggis specifically said you need to let it run its course. And if you get in the way, you're basically only speeding up the process. The process has to be Pumpkinhead, thy mission is done, and he bursts into fucking flames, and you atrophy into a little fetus mummy.
And someone else has to go bury you? Because my idea would be that Pumpkinhead, like once it's really done, then you go back to normal, Pumpkinhead crawls back to the pumpkin patch and buries himself.
You might be onto something here.
Because I guess maybe that's Haggis's whole family trajectory, is that she goes back and picks up the husk. Because I like your idea better. It makes a little more sense. Because the metamorphosis is happening. Or does it just stop in reverse?
To me,
I know we're just guessing stuff, but it's so fascinating.
To me, it depends on... Okay, So the impression that I got of Haggis was not specifically that she is connected to Pumpkinhead in the sense that her family is somehow charged with it or anything of that nature. I think she is a mystic. She is a witch. She is a magical practitioner, and she is just aware of this. So I don't know if it's almost like, if we could liken it back to Pet Sematary, you're aware of what this cemetery does, but you're not really in charge of the cemetery. But she takes it upon herself perhaps to do this because it didn't go the way it was meant to, because he didn't let it run its course. And so to make things right, to put things back, because she seems, again, sort of cosmically neutral on the Pumpkinhead curse. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is kind of like either Pumpkinhead does his revenge and then will take you and bring you back to that place, and maybe that process begins. Maybe once you become Pumpkinhead dies and bursts into flames, and now you under some kind of primal desire or urge, bring yourself to the graveyard, and almost like a self burial thing or whatever the fuck it is, like you're possessed by this process. It or it, like Dark Harvest, it does need a third party, and that is Haggis, a person who just knows of this thing, and to make things right, something needs to be returned to Razorback.
I think that's probably the easiest way to reconcile this whole thing, because Pumpkinhead does burst into flame, which, you know, is a spectacular ending to it all. But the transformation is creepy, very creepy, to get this more humanoid face happening on Pumpkinhead himself. And it's very good effects. Like all of this, we're talking about like the tricksy, foolish vaudevillain kind of Pumpkinhead, but it's never really slapstick. And it is all very well done. Like, we forgot to mention just how gory and wonderfully done all of these kills are, and how graphic it all really is. And dark and moody on top of that, while we're making kind of fun of some of these kills. Yeah, they are like really graphic and well done.
Honestly, my favorite death is Maggie's death. I think pushing her through that window, and then this torrent of blood that pours out from her torso all down the sink. I think it's so well done. It's very gory, and like, this is just like such a great monster movie. It really is so well done. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was this was the beginning of, I have a ritual that takes place within the month of October. And that is, it's great to watch all your favorites. It's great to watch, you know, Halloween and Trick or Treat and all that kind of stuff. But within those 31 days, you must watch something that you've never watched before. You can do a new film, you can scratch a classic off your bucket list. And when I was a kid, I specifically was like, I want to watch a new horror movie that I've never seen before. And I picked out of a hat Pumpkinhead, that because I saw that it was on TV. I was like, I'm watching this. And I liked it so much, despite being a little disappointed in Pumpkinhead's design as a kid, that became like, that was a good idea. And I'm going to do this every year.
What was the new movie this year?
The new movie this year was Scream of Fear, and I covered it on 31 Days, 31 Slashers. It was the first movie that I did.
Oh, cool. So the horror historian. I'm going to have to go back and watch that because I watched some of your 31 days, but I got them kind of piecemeal because I don't log in very often or watch videos on my phone very often. So I'll go back specifically and watch that first one. That's a really cool tactic. And even though this doesn't take place explicitly in October, like we've said, it feels so very October-y. And it is called Pumpkinhead. There are pumpkins to be had, so it's a perfect fit for that.
And also, just wanted to make a correction. It's Silent Scream, not Scream of Fear. Scream of Fear is the Hammer film, which I've seen many times. But that's okay. You can see why I would make that confusion. Barbara Steele is in it. So wild.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
I really like that film. Maybe one day we'll do it for the show because it's got an interesting backstory and it's well done. It's just a well done slasher movie. I think that the only thing that kind of stinks about Pumpkinhead is they never really reached this again. There are sequels. I don't mind the second one. There's some made for TV ones that I've never seen. And there's a comic book series, which is actually quite good.
Have you ever played the video game?
I have never played the video game.
Neither have I, and it looks fantastically wretched. But yeah, I would have to see if it's good. I'll have to see if there's someone that plays it online. So, we talked about Ed shoots himself, can't quite die. There's a lot of shooting going on because that's really how he meets his end. How Ed and Pumpkinhead together meet their end in this. And then Pumpkinhead bursts into flame, which is, I guess, the fitting demonic end.
Yes.
Entirely.
Back to the
now,
pit.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of the sequels at all. Do any involve Ed specifically? Like, does Pumpkinhead resurrect with the same necklace that we see Billy create for Ed at the beginning of the film?
I don't remember, but if you want to know if Ed is in the sequel, yes.
Okay.
I don't remember if the necklace is there. I meant to watch Pumpkinhead 2. I have it. I have that on Blu-ray as well. But
I've never watched it.
I didn't get around to it, unfortunately. But I wanted to say the last shot we see of Haggis, of her lowering that husk into the earth and seeing Billy's gift to her father get buried in sand. First of all, this is the first time that we get a really good look at her costuming, and you can see the bird bones, and you can see her outfit that she's wearing. And again, like, just incredible. Like, what an incredible character. What a great visual. And every like, so many scenes of this film can look like a painting, and this scene of her lowering that husk and, like, with the shovel looks like a painting to me. Like, it's so gorgeous in that old pumpkin patch, because now we can see everything. It's better lit, and we can see her, and she's better lit. And it's not one of those things where you're hiding this makeup with low lighting and she's going to look bad. She looks great, even in, like, clear lighting. So I just wanted to point that out because it's just, like, such an accomplishment. And if people listening to this haven't watched this film, I gotta say, like, if you like monster movies, or if you like fairy tales, or if you just like any sort of revenge story, like, I don't want to overhype it too much, but this really is very underrated for a film that does have sequels, for a film that has comic books and some merchandise. I just feel like not a lot of people talk about this fucking movie.
It's true. And, like, it is all of those things. Like, it is a dark fairy tale. It is a great monster movie. And a long while ago, Thomas Nichols was asking us, we get into conversation about film sometime, about voodoo films. And while this isn't technically voodoo, and it's not a Haitian voodoo film whatsoever, it is kind of a backwoods witch magic kind of story too. Even though it's not overtly that, it's having haggis in it, and the look of her and her hovel and stuff. It feels so very bayou, Louisiana, swampy, voodoo, even though it's not. And it is very much like Appalachian mountain people sort of magic that we don't know enough about folk magic. So it is also a folk horror in that sense. And I think it really excels in that, even though that's what it is in its C tier. Like it's A tier monster film, B tier dark fairy tale, Halloweeny kind of movie, and then C tier folk horror. And it is often used as a folk horror, but I think that the monster movie of it all outshines its real folk horror like strengths.
I agree, particularly so much of the creature is present in the latter half of this film. Really, I don't want to, like, I love slasher films, so I would never use the term slasher to denigrate a horror film, but it does kind of get into slasher territory in the sense in which you're just sort of like, okay, we're done with all these characters. It's time to just cycle through them. But the real scenes that shine is everything Lance Henriksen is doing, and again, just the scenes with haggis, like they're my favorite part of this movie by a country mile, and for that alone, it's just like a really incredible watch. So what do we got next for him?
Coming up next, we thought we'd stick with Revenge Ghosts Buried Underground and little weird kids throwing balls. We're going to do The Changeling, which is a film that has been in conversation from time to time on other shows I've been listening to and watching about ghost stories, especially around Halloween. This film gets talked about for whatever reason, but neglected, and I haven't watched it in a couple years, so I really want to get to that again. So it seemed like a good pick to follow up Pumpkinhead? Not really, but I mean, it's a great film.
I am interested in doing this film because we are now officially in the chilly month of November, and it always makes me think of ghost stories, because we know that Christmas time is the time for ghost stories. And while we're not at Christmas yet, we are feeling a little bundled up, and you know, The Changeling's got a lot of sweater vests. It seems like a chillier film, and so I think it's absolutely appropriate. Plus we've been you know, doing slashers, we've been doing like some found footage stuff, and we just did a full-on monster film, and we got to get back to like hallways, stairwells, sounds, library scenes,
candlelight, if we can hack it.
Yeah,
that'll be coming around the bend. But I think that it is a good precursor into November, which is sort of like a middling month. It's not quite scary enough. It's not 100% Scrooge levels of ghosts. It's just cold and dreary, and the Changeling has a lot of cold and dreary aloneness and quietness to match that month.
It's such a serious movie.
It is a serious movie.
The thing that I like about The Changeling also, if I could say, and I'll talk about this more in the actual episode, but much like Black Christmas, it seems to be the horror film that people in my personal life tell me was the most frightened they've seen watching a movie. So it has that pedigree with me as this, you gotta watch this film. And I remember watching it for the first time with the understanding that this was something that a lot of people that I value the opinion of and are close to me say, this scared the shit out of me.
Fantastic. I hear a lot about it from writers. Not necessarily that it scared you, but this is how you scare people with a film like this.
And we also scare people by ending our beloved episodes. I'm Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.